Today's lesson is inspired by Genesis chapter 19, verses 15 through 17, and 25 and 26, which read, With the coming of dawn, the angels urged Lot, saying, Hurry, take your wife and your 2 daughters who are here, or you will be swept away when the city is punished. When he hesitated, the men grasped his hands and the hands of his wife and of his 2 daughters, and led them safely out of the city, for the Lord was merciful to them. As soon as they had brought them out, one of them said, Flee for your lives. Don't look back, and don't stop anywhere in the plain. Flee to the mountains, or you will be swept away. Thus the Lord overthrew those cities and the entire plain, destroying all those living in the cities, and also the vegetation in the land. But Lot's wife looked back, and she became a pillar of salt. And so it reads. Happy New Year, and don't look back. As we face the never-ending uncertainty of our future, what does it take for us to truly have a Happy New Year? We look at the new year as a time to wipe the slate clean and start over again, to heal the wounds of the past and renew our determination to make our lives better. We reflect on the positive and negative things that have happened over the past year, and we start planning improvements for the coming months. We resolve to lose weight, to be kinder to our neighbors, to forgive the deeds of others, to clean the house more often, to spend more carefully, or to be a nicer person. We mean well, and sometimes we actually succeed, but it isn't always easy. We tend to limp along like someone who has had a stroke, our strong spiritual side working extra hard to progress forward, while the paralyzed dead weight of our human past slows us down, holding us back. A wise person once said, "A New Year's resolution is something that goes in one year and out the other." I read a news feature that mentioned that we only keep about 14% of the resolutions we make. We often set our goals so lofty that they're nearly impossible to achieve. Instead, they said, take baby steps. Make changes you can achieve. Vow to lose 5 pounds, or to dust the living room, or to eat more vegetables with your meals. When you succeed, it's easier to add on new goals until you get where you really want to be. But what is a resolution? It literally means resolving the past so you don't have to relive it. What better time is there than now to review our weaknesses and learn to become stronger, better people? We have to remind ourselves that if we only look to God, not a man on a throne in the clouds, but that source of creation within us, then we'll find that all is in divine order, and we'll never have lack of anything we need. It's when we fall back on our human emotions that things go wrong. What is it inside of us that makes us continue to look toward the material instead of the spiritual to resolve our problems? The economic crisis of 2008 was one of the most notable in our lifetime and taught some important lessons in trusting in ourselves. Not long after that economic downturn began, a national survey reported that 95% of those polled viewed the economic situation as a crisis or serious problem. But how many of those people were actually experiencing a crisis in their personal lives at the time it happened? And how many of them chose to panic, even if they weren't directly affected by the events that brought it all about? Why do we become consumed by what happens in the world around us? This response of doubt and fear is driven by the human side of us, that dead weight making us lose confidence in our situations and causing us to be afraid of losing what we've worked so hard to gain. When we believe that we're prosperous and successful, we are, and everything is fine. When we start seeing small signs that the good times might not last, we panic and things start falling apart. We stop spending money because we might lose our job and then we wouldn't be able to pay our bills. If we can't pay our bills, then we risk losing our home and everything else that is so dear to us. This causes revenues to drop and businesses to falter, which causes the jobs to disappear, which then brings on more fear. At the risk of sounding full of doom and gloom, this is a perfect example to illustrate how we are the cause of our own problems. Our fear and worry cause doubt, which produces negative results. That is the law of attraction at its worst. And look how long it took for us to recover from it. A friend of ours had a dream to buy a house. He saved and saved for more than 20 years, but whenever a good opportunity for a home came along, he started worrying about what might happen if his job contract wasn't renewed. Even when he really was in danger of losing his job, the contract ended up coming through, and the frantic months he spent worrying about it ended up being for nothing. Even though he hadn't bought his house, he had lost it 1,000 times in his mind. Over his entire career, he has never been out of work. In some cases, he's had more than one job at the same time. In hindsight, he could have bought a nice home many years ago and had much of it paid off and would be sitting pretty right now. Instead, he chose to rent the same room in the same house year after year. He lost opportunities that will never come again. And all of this because he was afraid of the possibilities instead of embracing them. Eventually, he did buy his house, a foreclosed fixer-upper. In a way, he had overcome his fear, but then he found it replaced with new fears. There had been water damage while the house was unoccupied. How would he pay for repairs now that he has a mortgage payment? And what if mold develops? You get the idea. Fortunately, I think he's much happier now because his leap of faith finally proved to him that he can accomplish much more if he doesn't let himself get bogged down by doubt, fear, and worry. If we let go and let God and know that divine consciousness never fails us, then there's nothing to be afraid of and nothing to lose. As bad as things have ever seemed, we have always had what we need to survive in this world. It may not be the way we want it to be, but how many of us, even in the worst of situations, can honestly say that we couldn't survive it? Am I saying that we shouldn't protect ourselves? Of course not. Our car won't last long if we don't change the oil and put air in our tires. It's always a good idea to set money aside for unexpected expenses. If we work in a volatile industry, it doesn't hurt to keep an eye out for more stable employment options. Do we need to shut God and the world out in order to do this? Of course not. Why not figure out where we need to go and then use that God energy to help us get there? It's so easy to assume what our future will be based on our past. Just because a bad storm came through last year, or even last week, doesn't mean it's going to happen again this year, if at all. Yes, we know that another storm will probably happen at some point, and we can prepare for that possibility without losing sight of the life we have to live in the meantime. Reflecting on our past shouldn't be so much about holding on and remembering as much as a tool to mold our future in a positive way. Yes, we can learn from our challenges, and yes, we can make changes to avoid reliving those situations over and over again. If we do it right, we learn from our experiences to make the future better. Regardless of whether or not it is historically accurate, the Bible is full of parables or symbolic stories that are designed to help us understand our nature. Every person, every place, and every situation represent aspects of ourselves on our path of spiritual growth. These metaphysical meanings are an important part of our spiritual teachings at the Meditation Center. In today's example from the Old Testament, Lot and his family were cast off from the turmoil and destruction in Sodom, given a new lease on life, and they were warned not to look back. As they left the city, Lot's wife just couldn't help herself. She had to look back, and she turned into a pillar of salt. In Aramaic, this was a way of saying that she was petrified with fear. Metaphysically, the city of Sodom represents the negative influences and error thinking that are always present in our lives. When we focus on our earthly, selfish desires and attachments instead of acting with spiritual, loving intent, we suffer. The angels represent our higher self, our innate understanding and wisdom that instinctively knows the right thing to do, even if our ego tries to steer us in a different direction. Lot and his family represent right thinking, being able to overcome negativity with determination and tenacity, which protects us from our dire surroundings. Lot represents the spiritual side of us, the part of us that trusts that all is in divine order, and the willingness to discard the old and welcome the new. Lot's wife represents the human side of us, our ego-based thoughts and attachments to the past. Even with all of the negativity in the city, there was still a familiarity. It was comfortable in its own uncomfortable way, which brought on an uncontrollable need to hold on to something that was real, if not ideal, rather than the uncertainty of an unknown future. The pillar of salt she became represents the paralysis caused by our fear and our unwillingness to accept change. Instead of growing and changing with our situations, we become stubborn and hard, resisting new thoughts and ideas that can make our lives better and more fulfilling. As we reflect on this story and its meaning, let's apply it to real life. Look at all of the changes we've experienced since the pandemic began 3 years ago. This upheaval of nature has forced us to look at our lives differently. It's not always easy, but it's also been inspiring. So many people spent years feeling bound to jobs that they thought they couldn't get out of. The pandemic forced them out of their uncomfortable comfort zone to find a new outlook. Over the past 3 years, millions of people have found new confidence, realizing that they don't have to stick with something that isn't working in order to survive. They can find new opportunities that are more rewarding, better paying, and give them a sense of purpose. And now they know that they don't have to live by preconceived rules that don't always make sense. And now they know they have the power to change their path again if it doesn't work out for their highest good. More importantly, they have found the strength to abandon the old ways, the old thought processes that held them back. Granted, much of the rest of the world is still catching up with this idea, but that's how positive change happens, one brave step at a time. Meanwhile, countless others are still finding their way. Some are bound by their fear. They're still afraid to go out unless they absolutely have to. Some people don't understand why they have to be inconvenienced because businesses are having trouble hiring people, or why it's happening at all. The same disruptions that have given so many people new freedom, like Lot, have caused others to be paralyzed by the thought of having to step away from what is comfortable, like Lot's wife. As you plan for the new year, don't look at it as an annual chore. Make it into a daily ritual that will open the door to your higher self. When you meditate, don't look back. Accept the events in your life, both good and bad, as lessons from which you have learned. Take an extra moment to understand both the purpose and the value of those lessons, and then let them go. The past is gone, so why let it hinder you by hanging on to it? Every day is a birthday. Every day is the beginning of a new year. Real estate investor Bill Vaughn said, "An optimist stays up until midnight to see the new year in. A pessimist stays up to make sure the old year leaves." We may laugh, but the pessimist may have the right idea after all. If we make sure the past is gone, all that's left is an open door to endless possibilities. In your meditations, communing with the God consciousness that's part of you, make your resolution to live every day as if it's your first, a clean slate. Release and forgive your past. It's gone. Embrace and welcome your future without worrying about what might happen. Instead, trust in what will happen. I'd like to close with a poem by Glenville Kleiser, published in 1931 by Unity in their magazine, The Daily Word. This was their daily affirmation for New Year's Day almost 100 years ago. I will start the new year bravely with a true and noble aim. I will give unselfish service to enrich another's name. I will speak a word of courage to a soul enslaved by fear. I will dissipate drab discord with the sunshine of good cheer. I will be sincere and humble in the work I have to do. I will praise, I will not censure. I will see the good in you. I will keep my mind and body sound and flexible and pure. I will give my time and study to the things that long endure. I will do what I am able to advance a worthy cause. I will strive to lessen evil and obey God's righteous laws. I will pray to God to guide me in the straight and narrow way. I will shun false pride and folly. I will live my best today. If you don't look back, all that's left to see is the world of marvelous possibilities in front of you. And so it is. Happy New Year. For additional lessons and meditation ideas, visit our website at www.meditatewnc.org. Thank you for joining us.